Good afternoon. This is Touchstone Business Sustainability Series 12 with Kehinde Lawanson. Welcome to BSS by Touchstone. This is in association with Master Skill Consulting. Thank you for joining us. My name is Tunde Ojo. It's a great afternoon, and I'm glad to tell you that I lead the Touchstone team. BSS Business Sustainability Series is our initiative to dimension the key drivers of sustainable business growth in a world of chaos, crisis, and complexity. We want to engage entrepreneurs, and they are here. Business leaders, we welcome you, and brand managers in their quest, in their search for solutions, because they want to thrive, not only to survive. Once again, thank you for joining this all-important conversation. We are going to start with some housekeeping and ground rules, as usual, and I welcome you once again. Please note that all microphones and cameras should be muted during the presentation, with the exception of those of the presenter and the host. The reason is very simple, so that we can have a seamless program throughout. We are going to have a Q&A session after the presentation. Ladies and gentlemen, I want to welcome you. We are highly privileged to have, and I'm very excited today, and I want to quickly introduce him so that I can get out of the way because we have a lot to share. He has a lot to share with us. I've known this gentleman for a long, long time, and I will not bore you with personal introduction. I'll just make a brief introduction, and then we dive into the subject of today. The topic is very simple. It's business vulnerabilities in a corrupt ecosystem. Business vulnerabilities in a corrupt ecosystem. Mr. Kehinde Lawanson had his post-secondary education at the University of Nigeria and Nsukka and the University of Lagos, where he studied for BSc Estate Management and MBA degrees respectively. He started his banking career at the prestigious International Merchant Bank, IMB, an affiliate of America's First National Bank of Chicago, FNBC. He was subsequently part of the triumvirate seconded by IMB to manage the nascent Intercity Commercial Bank PLC. Here, he was the head of Lagos business. He resigned from IMB Intercity Bank PLC to join an indigenous merchant bank, Peak Merchant Bank, first as the deputy general manager, and was later appointed as the chief executive officer of the bank. In 2001, he joined the Gateway Intercontinental Banking Group, now part of the Access Banking Group, Bank Group, as general manager with responsibility for its corporate and investment banking business. 3 years later, he resigned to join Nigeria's biggest conglomerate, First Bank of Nigeria PLC, where he was subsequently appointed to the board as an executive director and served for the maximum of 6 years. In the course of his banking career, Kehinde Lawanson was largely a corporate and investment banker with responsibility for asset creation and structuring, financial advisory, product development, and marketing. He also managed channels. Over the period also, he has had very rich and sophisticated training in the leading academic and business institutions globally. These include the SAID School of Business and Manchester Business School of the Universities of Oxford and Manchester in the UK, GSB of the Stanford University in the USA, and 2 American Ivy League schools, that is the Wharton Business of the University of Pennsylvania and the prestigious Harvard Business School, of which he's an alumnus. He has had training attachments at some non-academic banking institutions like American Express, Bank London, and Chase Bank, formerly Chemical Bank in the USA. Mr. Lawanson's corporate governance skill was earned by serving on the board of a number of other institutions. For example, the telecom giants, Airtel Nigeria Limited, FITCL, Financial Institution Training Center, and as the national chairman of the Equipment Leasing Association of Nigeria, among others. He recently concluded a postgraduate program at the International Anti-Corruption Academy, IACA, Vienna, Austria, which further strengthened his corporate governance and anti-corruption interest and drive. He is married to Olukemi, an associate professor of economics, and they have 2 adult children. Ladies and gentlemen, it's my joy and pleasure to welcome our guest for Touchstone VSS 2F, Mr. Kehinde Lawanson. Let's welcome him. Thank you very much, Mr. Lawanson. Mr. Lawanson, the podium is yours, and we're eagerly waiting. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Tudeojo, a very good friend of many years, and a number of friends who have joined this platform today. You're all welcome. I'm very grateful for sharing your time with me. I'd like to start by sharing an experience. I think sometime yesterday, somebody was calling repeatedly. I didn't pick the call because I was busy. So sometime today, I got a text from that same number. The number was saying to me that they were aware of this program and that the boys want me to settle them. And if I did not settle them, there could be some disruption of this program. So I forwarded the text to the organizers of this program. So in a way, I'm saying to you all that if there's any disruption, it will not be because I did not cooperate. It will be because the principal of Touchstone Limited perhaps did not see you said to the boys. Thank you very much. Now, the subject of discussion is very of interest to virtually every Nigerian. We're talking about corruption, business vulnerabilities in a corrupt ecosystem. That's the focus this afternoon. I'm mindful of time, so I will race very fast. I have well over 60 slides I'm going to share. Some I will not speak to, allowing the audience to form an opinion about those slides. Now, the first thing is to look at what is our understanding of corruption. There are times that there's no consensus about what the meaning of corruption is. So it will be of interest to share the opinion of quite a number of people about this subject matter. One of the key people that has commented on corruption is a lady called Susan Rose Ackerman. Susan Rose Ackerman. She said corruption is an explicit exchange of money, gift in kind, or favors for rule breaking or as payment for benefits that should be costless. Susan Rose Ackerman recently stepped down as a professor of law at the prestigious Yale University in the US. She's a highly respected person in the field of anti-corruption. We're trying to build consensus as to our understanding of corruption. Susan Rose Ackerman said payments are corrupt if they are illegally made to public agents with the goal of obtaining a benefit or avoiding a cost. I think we can relate to that. Payments are suggesting that the man would drive against traffic in Nigeria, is consciously aware of the illegality of his actions and is willing to make payment to avoid the cost of that action. Vardy and West, they define corruption as a deviant behavior that is designed to benefit the individual, that's its type L, benefit self, or benefits the organization, which is type O, suggesting that there can be corporate play in corruption, as individuals can be corrupt, organizations can be corrupt as well. That's the essence of that. And of course, the highly respected Transparency International defined corruption as the abuse of entrusted power for private gain. The abuse of entrusted power for private gain. That can happen in the public sector. It can equally happen in the private sector. So having try to build a consensus as to our understanding of the word corruption, it will be useful to go into what the telltales are. What are the signs that you see in a very corrupt environment? One of the signs that you see in a corrupt environment is that the economy is driven by cash. Transactions are held not on transfer basis. Most transactions are held on cash basis. Why do the corrupt prefer cash? The corrupt prefer cash because cash is untraceable. Cash is largely anonymous. Cash allows concealment, of the transaction. The corrupt transactions are criminal transactions. So cash allows concealment. Cash is opaque. BBC, in one of their reports on Nigeria, focused on why cash keep turning up in homes, people's houses. They just see cash. EFCC during its investigations will just mobilize policemen to houses and they will be unloading cash. CNN, a global news organization as well, featured the problem of cash in Nigeria. Nigeria's anti-corruption unit finds 43 million cash in Lagos apartment, together with a photograph of the same apartment. Because corrupt people prefer to deal in cash for reasons that I have stated. Central Bank of Nigeria, sometime about in 2012, started with a policy that was supposed to be a cashless policy. In other words, ensuring that they reduce significantly cash transaction in Nigerian business transactions and economy. But after that regime, the regime that took over in CBN suspended the policy for all kinds of reasons. Large illiteracy population, people cannot use the alternative channels, all such reasons, all to promote the continued use of cash. And we all as a country now know that that is. In Nigeria, if you look at this graph, I imagine that we can all see the graph, according to Corruption in Nigeria Report 2017, 92% of all corruption transactions in Nigeria is cash. 92% of all corruption transactions in Nigeria is by way of cash. 4% food and drink, 1.6% favors, and I must add, favors including sexual favors. The other telltale you see is distressed financial services industry. Every environment where you have significant distress in financial services, you have huge corruption. Because distressed financial services companies are desperate because of illiquidity or insolvency. So they are willing to take any cash. They are willing to take any cash just for survival. So in other words, they will be willfully blind to all this know your customer policies. Cash is a vehicle for money laundering. Between year 1990 and year 2015, well over 52 deposit money banks. By deposit money banks, you mean commercial and merchant banks in Nigeria. Well over 52 deposit money banks have gone under or have their licenses withdrawn in Nigeria. That's a lot. When banks fail, businesses fail with them. People fail with them. They are not like just typical companies. When the company goes under, well, that's the business of the shareholders. But in the case of banks, when banks fail, businesses fail with them. Depositors go down with them. Absence of the rule of law. A report jointly issued by Nigerian Office of Bureau of Statistics, the United Nations Office Against Corruption, the report issued in year 2017 filed players in law enforcement and corruption in Nigeria. So 46.6% of all Nigerian police officers are corrupt. In other words, for every 2 police officers that you see, one of them must be a player in corruption. They said 33% of all public prosecutors are corrupt. In other words, 1 out of every 3 public prosecutors that you come across are corrupt. Judges and magistrates, 31%. Absence of the rule of law touches on this. This is a very apt photograph from Premium Times, putting the notoriety of the SSS in obeying court orders. They deliberately go against court orders. Predatory business and professional practices. The prevalence of fake goods including drugs. That is, you are not sure. Buying drugs in Nigeria, you're not sure whether you're buying original or fake. Buying other products in Nigeria, you're not sure whether it's original or fake. Is a predatory practice, business practice. And professionals do the same as well. We have heard of cases of banks hiring beautiful ladies for market. Is predatory practice. I have never heard of anybody brought to book on all these things. Why banks use beautiful women as marketers? That's the caption of a story by BC Premium Times. No bank has been brought to book on this nefarious activity. Non-existent, unreliable public record. We don't have a reliable national identity database. So you can see there can be a trading of criminals. They can pick somebody else on the street and charge him for a crime that he has not committed, only to let the criminal free. That only happens in a country that wants to thrive on chaos. Regulator and its vulnerabilities. Lidgard, a professor in Harvard, developed a corruption model that is displayed. Corruption obtains when there's monopoly power plus wide discretion, little or no oversight. It says corruption is where there's monopoly power plus wide discretion with little or no administrative oversight. And I think if you look at our Abuja today and governance of Nigeria today, there's some segment in the government have monopoly power with wide discretion, and nobody calls them to order, nobody can bring them to book. There's little or no oversight. There's opacity. Alan Greenspan, one of the longest serving chairman of the Federal Reserve in America, said something about regulators' or preference for concealment or opacity. Said secrecy is an unnecessary constraint on our obligation to be transparent in conduct the public business. In Nigeria, there's another addition, which is revolving door. Pick somebody from the marketplace to become a regulator. The person is clearly compromised. If he's not compromised, he's conflicted. And we see it play out in our country. You can interpret this body language. That's the CBN governor, recently deceased Alhaji Funtua, who is not holding any government portfolio. He's not in government. I leave that for your interpretation. Subverted democracy. Where democracy is subverted, there will be voting, there will be elections, but the election can only produce shackled candidates who are not free. And we all can relate to that in Nigeria. In the era of godfatherism, where political power is hijacked. This photograph should be of interest to us all. This was the year 2006 to around 2006, where Dr. Chris Ngige, a guy who went to St. John's Island, and Chris Sumba, who was supposed to be Godfather, were loggerheads. But you know, there are even more recent examples. And Ambode, alleged feud, puts godfatherism in the spotlight. So we have shackled candidates who cannot meet the requirements and the needs of the populace, of the voting public. Candidates who are beholden to godfathers, who the agenda is to please and satisfy the godfather. And we have what they call the subverted guilty. If you have engaged any of your friends abroad in discussion about corruption in Nigeria, one of the things that they immediately say is that Africans are corrupt because of gift giving. The gift-giving culture of Africa is not premised on reciprocity. When Africans give gifts, they do not expect payback. They expect gratitude. They don't expect payback. Because any gift giving that comes with mandatory reciprocity is corruption. That's inducement to disrupt market. Blinds judgment. That's what the Bible says. It says give blinds judgment. Choose darkness and opacity. What about colonialism itself? Some writers have said colonialism introduced corruption to Nigeria and Africa. Semoglo, a world-renowned economist, he was recently in Nigeria about a year or 2 years ago when First Bank was celebrating its 125th anniversary. They came with two principles of corruption, colonialism. One based on extractive state, the other based on what they call neo-Europes. Extractive state. Can we pause for some time?
Hello, yes.
I hope they are hearing me.
Yes, everybody's hearing you.
I can't see my photograph myself. I can't see my image myself, so I don't know.
No, we are. Just go ahead.
Okay, fine, thanks. And you are seeing the image as well. Okay, I can't see myself. Okay.
You can see everything.
We can see
you. I can see you. Can see you. Good afternoon, everybody.
You're welcome, thanks.
Sorry, before you go on, Mr. Lawanson, please, can we mute all cameras as well as microphones, with the exception of that of the presenter and the host? Thank you very much, so that we can have a seamless presentation without distraction. Go ahead, Mr. Lawanson.
Thank you very much. I was talking about colonialism, whether colonialism itself gave us the heritage of corruption. And I was making reference to the seminar papers of people like Asemoglo, Johnson, and Robinson, 2000, where they talk about the principle of extractive state and neo-Europes. The principle of extractive state was based on non-settlement policy. In other words, the colonial master did not decide to settle in the colonies. All he wanted to do with the colonies was extract the goods of the colony. Whereas in other environments, they actually settled in the colonies. Where they settled in those colonies, they built institutions, the institutions of law, the institution of order, the judicial institution, the financial services. They built institutions where they chose to settle. But where they didn't settle, they were just extracting. The worst example of that is what happened in Belgian Congo, where they were just extracting the rich natural resources of those countries. So all the non-settlement extractive states developed into corrupt nations today. A writer like Adrian in year 2012, referring to the British policy of indirect rule, and where they didn't have existing structures, appointed warrant chiefs. He said they appointed the dregs, the rejects in community, who are promoted as warrant chiefs. So this subversion and delegitimized the traditional governance. It antagonized traditional leadership, forcefully extracted obedience from the people, lorded over the people, abused their positions. There's a cult of mediocrity. Susan Rosackerman and Truex said every corrupt environment has one commonality. The people in charge are largely technically incompetent. He said technical incompetence makes the corrupt system run much more smoothly. And our legendary Achebe in 1984 challenged Nigeria and said it would be difficult to point to one important job held by the most competent person we have. That was sad, that he couldn't identify one important job that was held by the most competent person Nigeria has. And we can see it play out again. Corruption produces men who owe their job security to corrupt levers that need regular greasing and not to any record of performance. The latest report is that JAMB admission for 2020-2021 cutoff mark is 160 over 400. In a country where there's huge youth unemployment, who are they producing for? Why the cutoff of 160? The cut of mediocrity. 2/3 of Kaduna primary school teachers couldn't conveniently pass primary 4 exams. We're not talking primary 6 exams here. And that plays out in virtually all the states. Some governors have lost elections by trying to apply competency tests to teachers in primary and secondary schools. Weak institutions. We are Nigerians. We know how weak our institutions are. That our judges can be bought. You can get police escort for criminals. Shehu Musa, who used to be secretary to the government, was secretary to government under Shagari, said it is not only that officials are corrupt. Said corruption is what? Official in Nigeria. Weak institution. Farida Waziri, erstwhile executive chairman of the Economic and Financial Crimes Commission, lamented in Transparency International's report 2009 that the courts were frustrating the anti-corruption war in Nigeria. The courts frustrating the war. This speaks for itself. And let's go to fiscal and other indicators of corruption. And this is very important because there's been some very robust study by institutions like PwC, that is PricewaterhouseCoopers, on the correlation between corruption and development. Look at this index, tax as a percentage of GDP. Tax as a percentage of GDP in Nigeria is 5.7%. In Singapore, 14.1%. In Norway, 38.8%. In Congo, 6.6%. They said the lower the tax is as a percentage of the GDP, the more corrupt the environment, the society is. Look at per capita income. The $5,000 you are seeing in that place is purchasing power parity. It's not real. Nigeria is 2,000 and under. A country like Singapore, per capita income is $84,000. Norway, $68,000. Congo, $800. Years in school as an index. Nigerians spent max 9.7 years in school, suggesting that they live at GS3. Average Nigerian leave school at GS3. Same thing in Congo. Look at the number of years they spend in Singapore. Years they spend in Norway. That informed why every employer of labor, when they recruit a graduate, they have to pass him to another 6 months of training before putting him on the job. Because corruption has not allowed them to stay in school. Look at foreign direct investment. Mr. Kola, when he came about 2 or 3 weeks ago, spoke to this. What you see in this passage as $3,299 billion, $3.2 billion as FDI in Nigeria is actually largely portfolio investment. Portfolio is fly by night. It doesn't build infrastructure, factory. It just keeps the investor and run away. Compare that with Singapore, $92 billion. That's the foreign direct investment in Singapore. Norway is low, and I will explain that. And that's why we spotlighted that particularly. Because Norway has the biggest sovereign wealth fund in the world. Norway discovered oil in 1968 or 1969. Norway has not spent a dime out of the proceeds of oil till today. Norway has only spent the interest component because they believe that why would a generation exhaust that money while their other generation unborn? That is a principle on which they refuse to spend the proceeds of oil. You can say that corruption correlates with inflation. In Nigeria, 2.5, Congo 41.5. Nobody wants to invest in a highly inflationary environment. Then let's talk about Gini coefficient. Gini coefficient measures income inequality. It talks about the extremes of wealth and the abjectness of poverty. That is what Gini addresses. Look at, is it Gini or Gini? Because when people are in abject poverty, they become desperate. Sun newspaper of the UK reflected on what they call Nigerian African queens, the most outrageous bunch The rich kids of Nigeria show off their private jet, designer clothes, houses decked out in gold, in jaw-dropping displays of wealth. I think we can relate to this. Hush Puppy, E-Money. These are the people on display here. Extreme of wealth without contributing to society. You cannot trace what productivity generated this wealth for them. The corollary is the abject poverty. You can see BBC's focus on scavengers in Nigeria, and we drive our cars past them. Life expectancy. So anybody who is above 60 in Nigeria is already in overtime. Because life expectancy in Nigeria is 54. This is from Human Development Report 2019. World Happiness Report 2020. On a scale of 1 to 153, Nigeria is ranked 115. Nigerians are not happy. You can see a country like Singapore, 31 out of 153. Norway, number 4 out of 153. Norwegians, they have a basis to be happy. Their government makes them happy. You can see unemployment rate, 23% of Nigeria. And I think, in my opinion, I believe this is understated because there's over 40% youth unemployment in Nigeria. Congo, 46%. Business vulnerability. It's important to touch on some cases here. A number of us must have read about the Siemens case. Siemens case made a major a lot of international attention. Siemens, a major engineering telecommunication company German-based, known for efficiency, high-quality products, was caught in bribery scandal. It was a company policy. Bribing was a company policy. It was one way Siemens thought they could get business all over Africa, all over Asia, other developing parts of the world. It was the policy of the company of Siemens to bribe people to get business. You know, when the scandals blew, over 40 whistleblowers gave evidence against Siemens. A trial judge described the company as a system of organized irresponsibility that was implicitly condoned. The scandal shamed Siemens publics, that's its shareholders, German nationals, and the stock exchange. Board competence was questioned. Top management had to exit. Siemens had to pay substantial fine, over 2 billion euros. You know, because for countries like America, for instance, if you are listed on the stock exchange in New York or anywhere in the US, and you are caught in bribing foreign officials, you have to pay hefty fines. What was the cause of this scandal? Aggressive growth rate, which made managers see bribe as tempting shortcut to achieving performance targets. Loose Confederate management style. The management style was not really hands-on. Slack accounting process. And bribes were common practices in German business at that time. Unethical practices is costly. Loss of experienced hands due to the unraveling pathology of corruption. Cultural reforms take time and is expensive. It takes time. They've not fully regained public confidence. Corrupt companies suffer what they call capital punishment. In other words, it costs them so much more money to raise capital. And I share some Nigerian experiences. Ethical companies have lower cost of capital. As those banks that are perceived as unethical, the cost of the PIR rate on deposit, the banks that are perceived as ethical. Corrupt companies have high country risk factor. Ethical companies have lower labor turnover. Then trading is slow. Erosion of internal trust and confidence. When a company is corrupt, when the business is known not to have clear values, even the staff will be on the take. The staff will make more money in corruption than the company itself. There will be reign of impunity, high propensity to break the law. They pursue self rather than communal interests. Corruption is why Nigeria is bedeviled with scandemic. NDDC scandemic, which is recent. Police pension fraud, National Assembly, JAM, NUC. Just every corner, corruption did there in Nigeria. How bribery works in Nigeria. 65% of all bribes in Nigeria are solicited directly. A man asks me, "What do you bring? What do you carry?" It's solicited directly. 20% indirectly. And somebody will be interested, how is it done indirectly? In other words, how is bribery solicited indirectly? We all can relate with how it is solicited directly. When they send you on the run around, oh, the man has just closed. Oh, the man has gone for lunch. They've not told you to bring money, but they're suggesting something to you. They give you the run around. Oh, we don't have enough drugs. We don't have papers to type you or something. We don't have all kinds of reasons. That's indirect. And there are some people who use third parties. In fact, some police officers don't collect bribes directly now. They have a tout who you drop the money with. Third parties. And then in 8% only, the citizen volunteer is suggested by the citizen. It's of interest to pause and reflect on the 75% that solicit directly. They solicit directly because they believe there is reciprocity. They have the ability to perform, to deliver on their promise once they collect the cash. It's of interest to mention a country called Chile. One of the things that Chile did was, okay, let's speak to this slide first before I go into the Chile story. In this slide, 70% of all bribes in Nigeria is before service. 13.5 after the service is done. In other words, you pay before they deliver service to you. Now, the man who is paying, who will pay before service is delivered, believes that after that payment, service will be delivered. In other words, he believes that he will not lose his money. If he thought he was money, he will not pay, suggesting that reciprocity is key in corruption. So if the man does not believe that there will be reciprocal benefit to him, he will not pay. If he believes that reciprocal benefit, he will pay. So one of the policies that Chile did was to make sure they had a wide law in Chile. Say, look, anybody, you are free to collect bribe. But let us not be able to prove that that bribe you collected influenced your decision. Once there's no reciprocity, everybody learns to stop giving bribe. Because the man can collect the money, you can go on the air and say whatever. He will that, yes, that's why you didn't get the job. So once there's no reciprocity, bribery will stop. UNCAC, that's United Nations Convention Against Corruption, in year 2000, profiled the negative effects of corruption. It's a corrupt society. It undermines democracy and the rule of law. It breaches human rights. It distorts market. Just imagine people sourcing product from the same source. Somebody paying duty, another person is not paying duty. Of course, the market is distorted. It negatively impacts the quality of life. Also helps organize crime. We have some data for you on business failure statistics. On even playing field, trading in intelligence. You know, even regulators give information to players on how to handle their business. They trade on intelligence. They trade favors. In many cases, there are external interference, regulatory capture, which we are going to talk about. Threats to going concern. Culture of non-compliance. That's what happens when there's corruption. There's a culture of non-compliance because they can pay for it. Why would they comply? Culture of non-compliance, abused by both owners and management. There's a story, and I'd like to refer you to NDIC report 2008, page 10, on All State Trust Bank. Bank was fingered for willful violation of rules and regulations. And the dominant role of the chairman and CEO, who NDIC report described as operating as an emperor. He operated like an emperor in a public institution. Is it bad apples or rotten orchards? Corruption and fraud. Corruption spreads the cancer, like the cancer of like cancer of COVID-19. The Bible says a little leaven leavens the whole lump. We are asking whether it is bad apples or rotten orchards. KPMG report says NNPC is a house of corruption. They didn't say one person. Everybody say it's a house of corruption. Lately, a minister or a cabinet minister, Mr. Akpabio, named federal lawmakers involved in NDCC contracts. So the Nigeria's case is not a case of bad apples, it's a case of rotten orchard. Corruption results in career implosion, business debt, the debt of businesses. There's a recent example, just about 10 years ago, a recent example of a man who was highly touted as and respected in the business world in Nigeria, Mr. Bumioni, on the Cadbury account of a statement. And what damage that did to his personality, his career, and his opportunities. Uncertainty and threat to going concern. I leave you to read this. United States Office of the Controller of Currency and the Financial Crime Enforcement Network, FinCEN, suspended United Bank from all, that's UBA, from all wire transfers effective March 2008. Being that it failed to identify and report roughly $197 million in suspicious transactions, including some that reportedly involved Mr. Charles Soludo or Dr. Charles Soludo and Tune Lumelu. This was extracted from the Graduate School of Business, Stanford University, 2010. That happened in America. Nothing happened in Nigeria. Uncertainty and threat to going concern. All State Trust Bank is listed as one of those banks, 52 banks whose licenses have been withdrawn. Icon was an American bank set up in Nigeria until indigenization, when Nigeria had control. In an NDIC report on Icon, said from 1993 to closure, the interest income was less than 50% of the interest expense. For those who are not from financial services or bankers, what that do? The lady who sells boli, of course, must buy raw plantain before producing boli. That the cost of plantain was much more than the price at which she sold the boli. And that can only happen if she sold the boli to herself. So people collect high deposits and create loans at lower interest to their friends and lackeys. That's what that is addressed there. Perspective from behavioral science. It says the theory of individual utility, and those who studied O-level economics or some economic courses will be able to address their minds to this. The theory of individual utility maximization postulates that an individual will be involved in corruption if the benefit associated with that outweighs the cost. We can think about that. We can ponder on that. Braithwaite, not Tunji Braithwaite, question the irrationality of anti-corruption. So given the great rewards and the low risk of detection, why would so many people adopt the economically irrational cost of obeying the law? If it's cheap, if corruption is cheap, why not just do it? Somebody said the best way to be a thief is to first identify who to share with. That is what Nigerians have done very well. That is why no cases get to court. Even if they go to court, no convictions. Now, let's focus on the types of corruption typologies. We have chosen to just profile 5: petty corruption, grand corruption, state capture, systemic corruption, bottom-up or bottom-down or top-down corruption. Petty corruption is simply retail and granular in nature. That is the corruption that shapes perception. It is all commerce corruption. It's often likened to an informal VAT. It is in reality a VDT, value discounting tax. It makes planning and institutional policies difficult to implement. It is commoditized, undifferentiated, and plastic. That is petty corruption. 20 naira, 100 naira. That is petty corruption. The street language that often describes the giver or the gift is some dash, cola, brown envelope, settlement. Its prevalence helps to feed perception. Grand corruption, large sums of money, small group of players. Players are in strategic positions. Players are influential. That is large corruption. Grand corruption. State capture. This is where state custodians, civil or public servants, are actively involved. The exact influence on legislation. We all, I mean, if you have read Okonjo-Iweala's book on corruption in Nigeria, she reported cases where ministers go to defend their budget proposal before National Assembly. And the assembly members are making demands. They're making demands on them to pass their budgets. We all remember a minister that was fired by President Obasanjo when he was in office because he consented to the demands of the National Assembly. Bottom-up or top-down corruption. This is of interest. Where it is bottom-up, this is where you pay for your posting. I think we can do that in Nigeria. You pay for your posting. You are put in strategic traffic location, and you can only stay there if you report back. If you pay back to your boss, the boss becomes the aggregator. We all remember the story of Alpha Balogun, the dismissed Inspector General of Police. That was a case of top down. You know, the boss made all the money, but bosses want to keep their position after all the money. They have to find a way to share the boys under. Tafa refused to share, so the boy is spilled. Corruption common tools. I need to run now. Fiscal and human development indices, red flags. This was from World Governance Indicator 2018. You know, voice and accountability, free speech. They say Nigeria, free speech is 33.5, but I would say it's worse than that. Because, yes, to some extent, you could say there's press freedom, but the Nigerian press are buyable. The press reports what you want them to report. To that extent, I think it should be lower than 33.5 on 100. Singapore is a subtle dictatorship. That's why their figure is as high as that. Norway is 100% free speech. You can call the president name, nothing happens to you. Political stability, no violence. Government effectiveness, regulatory quality, rule of law, control of corruption. Those are all the indices that are profiled here. Lastly, perceived level of public sector corruption. This is from Transparency International. Nigeria used to be score over 100, used to be 27, 28, 29. Now it has diminished further. This was 2019 report. Singapore was 85%. Norway 84%. Congo 18%. The rank out of 180, Nigeria was 146. Nigeria used to be 127, 130. We have deteriorated further. 168. And Congo is a country that just came out of corruption and global competitiveness. Out of 141 countries, Nigeria was 116. Score 48.3%. Global competitiveness, suggesting that why would people want to come here when there's no when there's no level playing field? Why would people want to invest in Nigeria? Those are issues that the country needs to address. Those are issues that make for business vulnerability in a very, very corrupt ecosystem. Thank you for listening to me.
Thank you very much, Mr. Kehinde Lawanson. Very, very sobering thoughts. I don't even know where to start. Believe you me. Thank you very much for scholarship, well presented. And I can also tell you that I know this gentleman quite a bit. He walks the talk. He had to resign from being the managing director of a bank, and he was out of job for about 18 months on issues of integrity. Ladies and gentlemen, we can have, sometime, this once again is business vulnerability. Mr. Lawanson, Kehinde Lawanson, has given us different definitions of corruption, telltale signs, corruptions, and you mentioned quite a lot of them: distressed financial services industry, absence of the rule of law, non-existent, unreliable, public sector, regulatory, and subverted democracy. And then they move on to the cult of mediocrity, incompetence, and the quotes by Achebe and all of that. And then he also spoke about fiscal and other indicators of corruption, and did a fantastic scholarly comparison between Nigeria, Singapore, Norway, Congo, Democratic Republic of Togo, life expectancy, and so many indicators because of our time. He spoke to us about business vulnerability, and he gave a case study of the same story and the challenges, but the good news about Cement is that, the company is turning around. He talked about capital market punishment, the culture of corruption, where the staff will make more money in an organization than the company itself. And he also told us how bribery works, 65.4, directly, in which people ask, and then indirectly 20%. And then talking about uneven playing field created by corruption, career implosion, business damage. And then he spoke of corruption typology: state capture, petty corruption, bottom-up corruption, and so many. And then he finished by talking about fiscal as well as AGI red flags. Ladies and gentlemen, I think we have Mr. Lawanson to thank for these extremely, it's not just scholarship, it's also very practical, and it's very sobering, because even the president threw up his hands a couple of days ago. Was it yesterday or the year before yesterday? That he said, the people I put in place that I trusted very well, they have created quite a whole lot of wahala for me. Now we have some interventions because our time is fast spent. We take a couple of them, and Adewumi Alabi has signified. You just signify by, raising your hand, and then you can mute Adewumi Alabi, speaking from United States. Thank you very much. I must say, before we start this, I want to thank everybody that has come here, distinguished people. I can't start mentioning your name. We will not leave here. I've seen Mr. Obaro, Mr. Klembaye, across people from, across the Atlantic, and distinguished people, leaders of thought. Once again, before I forget, the whole essence of Touchstone Business Sustainability Series is to bring thought leaders here and to dimension issues that are challenging business and the business environment, so that businesses can be sustained and be sustainable in Nigeria against the background of the pandemic and the new normal that we have, and also the next normal. We've been very, very glad to have distinguished people in this series. Biono Adedipe, so many people. Let me Alabi, please. Can you come on here?
All right. Good afternoon, Kehinde. You did a good job, but my wife and I have been listening to you, and we do have a question that we want to ask.
Just go ahead.
Hi, good morning. This is Adewumi Alabi's wife, Olutoyin Alabi. It's a pleasure to have been on. My question is, great to hear you, Mr. Tudiojo. It's great to hear enumerations of levels of corruption in Nigeria. The question is, we need also, as we talk about the question and the problems, to enumerate and list, make the effort to bring out the sources of solutions. How can we change what is going on? At the organization level, when we talk about the situations, we look at solutions. In fact, what we encourage is that once you come and you enumerate certain problems, you should come with at least 2 solutions to that problem. I'm saying that at this level of discussion, we should not end until we talk about certain forms of solutions, so that will be a source of challenge to the listeners to say, how can I contribute to this solution? How can I build up on this solution? How can discipline become the crux for distinguishing a nation as large and formidable as Nigeria? So what can we do? Thank you.
I think the point is made. Thank you very much, Dr.
Thank you very much. Do I need to respond to that?
Don't respond to that yet. Let me give you another question quickly from Mr. John Tanya Obaro. Is in the chat room, and you can send that moves pretty fast so that we can save some time. In a country where you have extreme poverty and mass illiteracy, do you think this combination works well under democracy, that is mass illiteracy and extreme poverty? You need voters who respond, unfortunately, to the highest payer. How can we go on in cleaning corruption under democracy? I hope you got that question. So can you quickly deal with these two questions while we look for other people that may want to ask questions?
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Yes, thank you very much, and I thank Dr. Alabi and her husband. Interestingly, her husband was my best man. That is, Adewumi Alabi was my best man when I got married 32 years ago. In the course of the presentation, I addressed a particular slide where they said 70% of Nigerian corruption, particularly public sector corruption, was solicited directly. And I touched on the confidence that made for that solicitation. In other words, or whoever paid for that they believe that there will be performance. Before you paid for something and go to sleep, you actually believe that there will be performance. So there will be reciprocity. In fighting corruption globally, one of the tools that the anti-corruption activists have used is making sure that they truncate reciprocity, make it impossible for the man who collected the money to deliver the promise or the service. So how do they do that? I gave example of a country like Chile. Chile, it's not an offense for you to collect bribe. It is only an offense for it to be proved that that bribe influenced your decision to give that job to Mr. A. So people in Chile will collect bribe and they will default. They will not perform. They will not reciprocate. So that itself dried up corruption in Chile. If we do the same in Nigeria, people, once you truncate reciprocity, the ability of the bribe collector to deliver on the promise of bribery, bribe will end. That's one. The second is tone at the top. There's nowhere you have seen corruption checked that you don't see the involvement of the topmost leadership. If you work in an organization, a bank, an oil company, a telco company, and you are the head of the place, the tone at the top defines the performance below. If they are very sure that their boss, Brooks No Nonsense, does not take bribe, it has to be some degree of effrontery or boldness or confidence for somebody to toe the same line, for somebody to collect bribe. So once you truncate reciprocity, once there's a good tone at the top, because sanction, that is the approach we have attempted to use, sanction. Sanction seldom works because the parties, once the transaction flows well, you won't even know it has happened. Sanctions seldom work. In some environments, they have used sanctions. So, truncating reciprocity, good tone at the top, that is the leader himself is against corruption. Those are the only instances where it can work. Then to Mr. Obaro, saying that the question of where there's mass illiteracy and there's poverty, whether people can. The problem of corruption in very poor countries, the real corruption is not done by poor people. In fact, the experience in the banking industry is that The poor man pay back his loan. It is the big man that does not pay. So the problem of corruption, if you sanction the untouchable, the man who does not have spine falls in line. That's the way it works. Some years ago, I was on a training in Chemical Bank in the US, and it fell on an April 15th. And I understand in America, if April 15th was when everybody filed their tax returns. So, and the post office is open till around 12 midnight. So the next day, we're asking our lecturer and facilitator in class, how do you get all Americans to pay their tax? That doesn't happen in Nigeria. The man busted into laughter. He said, no. He said, what Uncle Tom does is that... Sir, are you talking to me? So what Uncle Sam does is he targets the untouchable. The big celebrities. Once they can touch those ones, the man without spine falls in line. The same thing will happen in Nigeria. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I have another question for you from Tosin Oluyebi. Brilliant, mind-boggling, extremely practical presentation from Mr. Lawanson. What questions? How vulnerable businesses are to the corrupt ecosystem? Could you give some perspectives on how corporates and individuals can structure themselves to be successful without getting involved? That's a question by involved in this corruption.
Thank you very much. Those of us. Can I go on?
Go ahead, please.
Yeah, those of us who operated in the financial service industry in Nigeria, we can draw lines between ethical banks and non-ethical banks. For starters, for those who have been around for about 30 years in professional life, we know that most of those unethical banks ultimately did not survive. Mr. Kola, about 2-3 weeks ago when he came around, profiled the performance of stocks of our 4 or 5 banks, showing that ethical banks outperformed the non-ethical ones, even in stock performance. So we know that ethical business practice ultimately pays off. The Nigerian experience, which some of us can relate with, is that when you become anything goes, when you tolerate all kinds of values, you become a shell. The organization becomes a shell for all kinds of players. In fact, the players in that organization make more money than the organization itself. That is what the experience has been. Boys make more money than the organizations themselves, once you are tolerant of all kinds of values. So, and that's why a professional, the difference that you can make in your life as a professional is to imbibe very good ethical qualities. Christianity helps you to a large extent in that respect. Discipline helps you to a large extent in that respect as well. So once you imbibe good ethical values, the word spreads about you. I know that in the short run, you may be disadvantaged because like a friend of mine, he was looking for a job somewhere and somebody went around saying, oh, this is a man of integrity, this is a man of this, a man of that. Knowing that all those laudable attributes were disqualifications because those who are looking for who to employ, they saw those as negative. They want lackeys that they can boss around, they can instruct to do things, they can compromise, So ethical lifestyle, ethical professional conduct stands you in the best stead, even in the long run. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Mrs. Ibuku Dushote is here with us, retired permanent secretary in the presidency. Thank you very much for your question. How do we arrest and direct the tone at the top? What is the main focus? How? And then I think there's, I don't think it's a husband, Reverend Adiolu Dushote. There's a gentleman, Diolu, who wants to ask a question. Please, can you make it in 5 seconds, if you can do that, so that you can take that together, and then we close for today.
Well, it's me, Diolo Dushote, and please, Mr. Uju, if you look on the chat, the question is there already. The question is there now.
Okay.
Please just go ahead and read the question. Thank you.
Okay. The question is there a connection between the trajectory of the formation of Nigeria as a nation with the typical characteristics of its pluralistic components and its political structure? What does this portend for the youths of Nigeria? How do we solve this, except we say this will continue without stop? I'll take that again. You can imagine who the question is coming from. Is there a connection between the trajectory of the formation of Nigeria, all right, and as a nation with the typical characteristics of its pluralistic components and its political structure? What does this portend for the youths of Nigeria? How do we solve this, except we say this will continue without stop? Thank you. I think that may be the last question that we are going to take. Thank you, Reverend Odushote. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Before I address those questions, I'd like to share one or two other insights from studies. You know, in one of, I think by the same as Semiglo, in one of the studies conducted by them, they came about two practices in different developing countries. And here they profiled a country like South Korea. They profiled South Korea. You know, South Korea was under dictatorship for a number of years before they came into democracy. And they said that when South Korea was under dictatorship, there was a lot of corruption. There was a lot of corruption, but the corruption was played at the very, very top end, not lower levels. And people zoned industries. Some people were in charge of shipping and engineering. Others were into agri and all such stuff. They zoned it among themselves. They were corrupt. There was no antitrust. But the moment they started exporting and they needed to engage international partners, they came among themselves and said they now needed to index themselves to best practices and play by the rules. In their study, they call those stationary bandits. They call it stationary banditry. In other words, these people are not threatened by politics. They are economic superpowers. And the moment they wanted to engage the world in trade, they play by the rules. They talk about other developing countries of Africa who they call roving bandits, in that because of political instability, they get into office, they plunder the office because they know they will not last in office. So they have stationary banditry, roving banditry. That's the way it's run. Now, to my sister, Ms. Odushote's question, how do we shape the tone at the top? That is a question that is difficult to answer. Somebody in one of the studies, I think it was an LSE study, they said that countries that are corrupt and developing do not need democracy. They need some measure of benevolent dictatorship. Because, I mean, the democracy, the rule of law, the abuse of processes and all such stuff. Well, the jury is out on that. How do we shape the tone at the top? But one thing that is sure is that you can really not check corruption unless there's buy-in at the highest level. The buy-in at the highest level. If there's no buy-in at the highest level, it just can't work. It's expensive, it's costly, it is life-threatening. Now, to Reverend Odushote's question on whether Nigeria's pluralistic structure or society has fueled corruption. Human beings are the same anywhere. Human beings are the same. I don't believe that the diversity of our cultures, the diversity of our people is what has fueled corruption. I mean, look at the US. They have a lot of diversity as well. There's some Australia has some diversity. There are a number of countries with diversity. You know, I don't believe that is it. It is that we have really not taken the fight against corruption very seriously. Because the day we start taking it seriously, it flows from the top. The first man somebody said to me many years ago, he said, the test of a reformer is how that reform has hurt him himself. If your reform cannot hurt you, you can't really say you're a reformer. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Time is fast spent. We have Mr. Kehinde Lawanson to thank a whole lot, for this time. Ladies and gentlemen, Touchstone Business Sustainability Series is a weekly engagement, 3 o'clock every Saturday, Nigerian time, West African time, 3 o'clock is our time, and we bring along your way another thought leader who is going to dimension issues that will help us to do business better and in an ethical manner. I can't, if I start mentioning the names that I've seen on board, people have joined us, will not leave here. But it's sufficient to say we appreciate you all. We thank you very, 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 very much for joining us. It's 3 p.m. on Saturday, and I want to thank my teammates at Touchstone Limited for, the back end work to ensure that this really, really works. Mr. Koye Fajemisi, I want to thank you for coming. I mentioned Mr. Klembaye, Yomi Martins, Victor Amosu, Yemisu Tade, Remy Onibinde, Wande Majek, Reverend Adebeson, Abio Bukomi. The list is very long. I appreciate you. We thank you once again. Until we come your way again next week, that is Saturday next week at 3 p.m., we pray that God will bless you. Have a very great weekend. Once again, Mr. Lawanson, thank you for sharing with us.
Thank you very much.
Just going to close the meeting now. Thank you. It's been a wonderful, wonderful time.